December of 1991, the Sega CD was released onto store shelves. This add-on would attach to a Genesis and could play exclusive CD games as well as music. It had a lot more power than the base Genesis, allowing for more detailed graphics and even full motion video, which is something a lot of games decided to take advantage of. However, due to the very high price tag and the overall less enticing game library compared to the Genesis itself, the console ended up becoming a commercial failure. But that's not to say there weren't any good qualities to it. There were several standout games released for it. There were Snatcher, Earthworm Jim, the Lunar games, Rowe OST, and of course, the Sonic CD. Before the development of Sonic 2, a group of Sega employees branched off and began working on Sonic 2 in America. The remaining employees still in Japan found themselves working on Sonic CD, and I think this split is why Sonic CD ended up becoming what it is, that being one of the strangest platformers I think I've ever played. But before I begin the review proper, can I just say how freaking amazing these animated scenes are? They're simply phenomenal, and I've watched the opening more times than I can count. They pack so much momentum and evoke an amazing sense of speed. I can't get enough of it. In fact, these segments were actually produced by Toei Animation, best known for their work on Dragon Ball Z and One Piece. I especially love the way Sonic looks in them, and I'm glad they paid homage to it in Sonic Mania. And the game itself looks amazing as well. In fact, I'd say that Sonic CD's visuals is the strongest aspect of the game. But the developers really took advantage of the Sega CD's hardware. Each stage is brimming with color and detail, and it's all a pleasure to look at. But the game also manages to take level themes from Sonic 1 and transform them into something of its own. But the game has such a striking visual style that makes some of the zones look otherworldly almost. There really hasn't been another Sonic game that recaptured the unique visual style CD provides. This praise extends to the soundtrack as well. This game has hands down the best soundtrack of any Sonic game. But to be specific, I'm talking about the Japanese soundtrack. See, when Sonic CD came to America, it got its own soundtrack. It's a bit quieter and has more emphasis on guitar, making for a somewhat atmospheric score. I do really like the American soundtrack. It's quite good, but when I compare it to the Japanese soundtrack, there's no contest. I love the Japanese soundtrack. It's catchy, it's upbeat, and energetic. It's just a fantastic listen all around, and to me, it's the epitome of Sonic music. It really does a perfect job of making you want to go fast. Unfortunately, Sonic CD can outright punish you for going fast, which brings me to Sonic CD's fatal flaw, the level design. It's bloated, it's messy, and towards the end it can get kind of aggravating. The levels don't have much flow at all. There's less focus on slopes and loops, but rather a lot of normal platforming elements. Stages are filled with springs and bumpers, and this results in you getting pushed around when trying to progress. Collision Chaos is probably the worst offender of this. There's so many obstacles and set pieces scattered about the zone that are just meaningless. For example, at the start of Act 2, there's a platform hovering above you, and if you get on it, you can go in a tunnel that ends up launching you nowhere. And there's plenty of other things like this elsewhere in the game, and it just confuses me. It feels like the game is deliberately going out of its way to waste my time, and I really don't like that feeling. There are just too many times where I'll raise an eyebrow at a certain design element while playing, and the game ends up coming off as a bit of a convoluted mess. Although things begin to make a whole lot more sense when you realize that Sonic CD doesn't want you to play quickly. This game is primarily focused on exploration instead. See, your goal in Sonic CD is to stop Dr. Robotnik from causing a bad future in each zone, which is how you get the good ending. This is accomplished by utilizing time travel. In each of the zones, there are time travel posts placed throughout, but there are ones that take you to the past and ones that take you to the future. The past versions of zones feel very primitive and unoccupied, But the bad future is very industrialized and is filled with machinery, while the good future shows both nature and technology existing in harmony. Overall, I think the time travel mechanic is pretty neat in concept. In execution, however, it doesn't work too well. In order to time travel, you have to maintain speed for a certain amount of time before you can do so. However, due to the often cramped level structure, it can be very hard to accomplish that. There are specific areas that are intended for time travel, but they're somewhat few and far between. And what's strange about these areas is that when you're playing normally, these areas just end up feeling very out of place. So how does all this tie into getting the good ending? Well, in order to get a good future, you have to track down a generator in the past versions of each zone. So yeah, this is where that slow-paced exploration comes into play. You have to take your time and thoroughly explore these levels to find the machine. Now, I usually never play Sonic CD this way, and I was thinking it was going to be very boring and tedious. And I was right. Trying to explore these stages and deal with the time traveling can be incredibly frustrating. I had plenty of issues where I couldn't manage it to travel to the past due to the level structure. And I swear, there seemed to be more future signs than past signs, making it very difficult to get to the generator. The levels are ridiculously huge and can get pretty overwhelming, and when you're speeding through the stages, they end up seeming unnecessarily obtuse. Slowly exploring these levels isn't much fun in my opinion. It's more of a chore than anything. Although I suppose if you knew the game well enough, you could have an easier time, but I don't think that's a very good excuse. I think the zones themselves are pretty decent for what they are, despite the issues I listed above. Heck, even the special stages aren't half bad. You run around a field and have to destroy all the robots. It's straightforward and isn't overly difficult, although I think the hitboxes on the robots could have been more generous. These stages reward you with time stones, which also create good futures, so if you don't want to destroy the generators, you could do that instead. However, accessing the stages works how it did in Sonic 1, unfortunately, so you have to be extra careful in order to keep 50 plus rings. This really tarnishes the experience and can just cause more frustration. The only zones in the game I outright don't like are the final three, the first being Wacky Workbench. Now, to be fair, once you know how to traverse the stage properly, it's not too bad, but when you don't, it's a complete trash fire. The entire floor will bounce you high into the air, completely throwing you off. It can really get on your nerves, and you just end up scrambling around the zone just hoping you'll make it to the end. Then there's Stardust Speedway, which is aesthetically great, but it's just a disorienting mess. I never, ever truly know where I'm going. I just go forward and hope for the best. Lastly, there's Metallic Madness. I don't think this zone is very fun at all. It's tedious and has nothing going for it. It just feels very unpolished. But despite everything I've said so far in this video, I still have a lot of fun playing Sonic CD. It's weird, I can recognize and acknowledge all of its flaws, yet still enjoy it. I have the most fun with it when I play it at my own pace. I just run through the levels, time travel whenever, and I have a good time. Even though I'll end up getting annoyed on occasion. I would still struggle to call Sonic CD anything but average. Although it is way better than Sonic 1, that's for sure. It definitely wouldn't hurt to try out the game for yourself. But the 2011 version is only $5, so you don't have much to lose. And hey, if you're a big fan of more explorative 2D games, then you'll probably really like the exploration elements of Sonic CD. And if you are one of those people, then I implore you to tell me why in the comments below. I personally just think the game is incredibly one-sided and unbalanced. It doesn't really compensate for both ways of playing the game. And I understand that Sonic CD wanted to expand on exploration, but it was done in a very obtuse way. I mean, you look at a game like Yoshi's Island, for example, that game is still fun when you go through the levels normally. But if you go out of your way to explore and get all the collectibles, it just presents an extra challenge. That's how this kind of stuff should be implemented. Balance is what's necessary. Luckily, the final game in the retrospective does just that. At least, that's what I hear. Next time we meet, we'll be taking a look at Sonic the Hedgehog 3. People say it's the best one in the series. but I really haven't played much of it, so I'm interested to see if it lives up to all the hype. See you guys then.